Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of the program. We are live, we're national. I'm happy to speak with you. 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to kick it off what I think is the biggest story of the day. El Trompito Donaldus Magnus, the 45th and 47th President of these United States. He has completed the first step, right, of eliminating the Department of Education. He did so by way of executive order, something that President Ronald Reagan promised to do, or at least campaigned on, or mentioned during his campaign. I remember hearing that as a kid, and there was talk about it. And guess what? He pulled the trigger on that executive order today. I'm pretty happy about that, and I can't wait for it to be codified in Congress. And I think this is a big deal, and we're going to get into it in a little bit because, of course, this is where you cue all the crazies, right? All the extreme left, especially those that have a stake in the game, right? I'm not talking about the kids. They're going to say it's the kids, but I'm talking about all the people that live on the cash cow that is the Department of Education and so much of its grant money. Now they're going, what do we do now? How do we do this, right? You ever ask yourself a question? All right, I ask myself this question all the time. When I was growing up, I had a cousin. Yeah, he's still my cousin. I just haven't seen him in forever. Hector. And Hector got a job working for the New York City Sanitation Department. And I remember him saying, yeah, I'm a garbage man. And, it's good money. It's a good job. He's like, you could probably make more if you work for a private sanitation company. But, I work for the city. And, when you work for the city, you make a trade-off. This is him explaining when he got his job. The trade-off is you work in public service and you get a pension. And you earn a little less than, your counterparts in the private sector. All my teachers when I was in school, Public School 206, Public School 197, IS 240, Brooklyn, New York, every single one of my teachers, every single one, always said, oh, we're underpaid, overworked. I got the sense that because they were public servants, there was, oh, you think you could do that on a teacher's salary? I mean, that was the thing in the 80s and into the 90s. That's all they ever talked about was, can you do this on a teacher's salary? Then I move across the river to the other side of the Hudson County, New Jersey. And all the teachers are, they drive very nice cars. They live very well in nice suburban neighborhoods. And I couldn't help but think, this seems to be like a good gig. Like when I was, in my formative years, the only people I knew that had a house here in North Jersey and a house down the shore, every last one of them was a teacher. So clearly it was a great gig, right? It was a very good job to become an educator in New Jersey. They had a solid union behind them. They negotiated excellent contracts for them. It was understood to me, this is a good gig. And when I started finding out that they didn't earn less than their private sector counterparts, like the teachers at the Catholic schools or any private school even, they were still earning more. So were their principals, vice principals, superintendents, this miraculous role called an assistant superintendent. In some districts, there's more than one assistant superintendent. And when they ran out of money at the local level, because again, remember, it's all tax funded, they would use federal dollars that they got in grants. Imagine that. It's like welfare for the government, right? Federal tax dollars. So I say all of that to say, what's happening at the federal level needs to be taken as an example for what's happening and what should happen at the local level. Gone are the days where people are serving in the public good and doing so and earning less. But yet still today, the foregone or on its way out Department of Education, which now oversees certain loans that they made, that President Obama made run right through the department when it, in effect, turned into a bank. some of those loans can be forgiven. If you are a teacher, if you work in public service, if you work in a nonprofit, you can forgive after, 10 years of straight student loan payments. The federal government forgives these loans for people. And the question was always, well, why would you do that? And the answer was always, well, because they earn less. They earn less than people that go into other careers. Now, that part might be true, might. But I got to tell you, there are a lot of very, very well paid. Now, am I jealous? No, not jealous of them. I think it's interesting when we justify someone making, $180,000 a year by saying, well, listen, if I was in the private sector managing an organization, a budget of, $50 million a year and 600 students and, I'm just making these numbers up, 150 educators, of which 20 of them are administrators working beneath me, $180,000 a year for me being a superintendent sounds like chump change. I'd be making $225, $250, maybe $300 in the private sector. Well, then go to the private sector. Nobody asked you to become some sort of mini executive in our system. Nobody asked for our system to get that big. There are school systems and superintendents that don't earn that much money. And again, I don't care how much money people make. I'm not trying to make them earn less. It's that they are getting paid through tax dollars. And again, under the supposition, at least my erroneous supposition, I'll submit to that somehow people that work in the public sector that are quote unquote public servants agree to earn less than their private sector counterparts in exchange for their service and for a pension, right? And the miraculous benefit package that they get, which costs an arm and a leg, of which the public pays for. So I always thought that was fair until I figured out that that's not the case. People that are quote unquote in public service in many cases are earning a lot more than their private sector counterpart, especially when you factor in all the different perks that they get, like free health insurance. And I've gone on my soapbox about this many times in the past, but I worked for a school, not a little kid school, a post-secondary school. I think they're closed now, so I can say the name. It was called the Chubb Institute. It was a career school. I was the director of their admissions office. I was only there for a little while, but I remember this was, many years ago. I think my salary was $80,000 a year, and I paid $8,000 or $9,000 a year as my 20% contribution towards my family of four health insurance. That was the norm. The company pays 80%, you pay 20%. That's how it works. And you pay the copay, the deductible, whatever it is, that goes with the actual plan. So why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because when I got into the to the public sector to become a public servant, I was appointed by the governor to work in the administration. I found out that they didn't pay anything. They got the entire thing for them and their entire family absolutely free. The joke was on me, right? Because I was in the private sector and I wasn't paying a penny. They also had a state pension. On top of the pension, they had this really cool thing called deferred compensation plan. That is, in effect, another type of retirement plan, which included a 403B. And I was just blown away by how much money people could retire with from working in state service. Way more than most people were making. And I just thought to myself, this is crazy. It is just insane. And Governor Chris Christie, at the time, he also thought it was insane and said it's also unsustainable. We can't do it. So he said everybody in the state that gets free health insurance is going to have to contribute 1.5% of their salary towards their health insurance. And everyone was up in arms. They were going nuts. He's a dictator. He's a fascist. He's this and he's that. He's coming after this. He's coming. Amazing. And all I thought was, all they had to do is have a job in the real world. And I hate to say it that way, but they'd realize that the rest of us live that way. And that was never lost on me, and it's still not lost on me today. So when you tell me today that we're destroying the Department of Education, how could I be anything but happy, right? How could I be anything but excited for the savings that are about to come for our people, for our students, and everything else? Now, there's been a lot of talk in the news about what's going on in Gaza, what's going on with Hamas. And I want to get the take of someone who's a national security analyst who understands this better than most. She was the victim of an attack by terrorists as a child growing up in Lebanon. And she's going to be our guest right after this. So don't go anywhere. Brigitte Gabriel is coming up.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue our conversation, and I've been talking about the rise of radical Islamist militants, and this obviously has been a problem throughout the years, some of which I think, the CIA and the Americans might have created in some parts of the world. But nonetheless, it's a problem that we have to contend with today, as do the Israelis right now as they're going against Hamas. And I bring this up because with the advent of social media, there's so many things that we see. And I guess they've picked me with their algorithm to send things my way. And some of the things I see are interesting. And there's many Muslim clerics out there that I don't want to paint with a broad brush, right? I really don't, right? We've had Muslims on the show before, like Zuhdi Jasser, that are very, very competent, very kind, very, I'm going to say, normal people. But there are people that have been radicalized, both Christian and Muslim, right? That go to extremes. And some of those radicalized clerics that are, in my opinion, misusing their faith, have a radicalized view of their faith, are recruiting. And they're recruiting and preaching online. And one of the clerics I heard the other day was talking about why any Muslim would come to the United States. And it's not to pursue the American dream. I'll submit to you what he's saying is that we're here to take over. Listen to this.
As we're here living in the U.S., what is our role now? What is the way forward? Let me just quote for you an ayah of the Quran, and I'm going to try to encapsulate it. Allah is saying, do not obey the disbelievers. Don't yield to them. And then He gives us the process of what to do next. وَجَاهِدْهُمْ بِهِ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا. And so make jihad against them.
Now, I'm just going to give you another tidbit before we get some reaction to this, because I thought it was so interesting that I don't want to paint, again, every Muslim this way, but this is what the enemies of the West, enemies of Christianity, the enemies of the United States in many ways, this is how some of them think. Listen to this.
What is your duty as a member of the Ummah now that you are also an American? It is our physical jihad duty to fight the entire earth until we enter it into the Ummah.
Jihad until we enter, right? The afterlife and whatnot. So I want to get some reactions to this from New York Times best-selling author and the chairman of Act for America, actforamerica.org, Brigitte Gabriel. She was a journalist and is now in the United States doing her thing, endured a horrific attack as a child in Lebanon, and she's our guest now. Brigitte Gabriel, welcome back.
Thank you, Rich. I'm delighted to be back with you.
Thank you so much. And I played that clip right now, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because I feel like there is a rise in this radicalized Islamist view, or at least I'm seeing more of it. What are you seeing?
Well, I think the world's eyes are being opened right now because, like you said, because of social media, we are able now to see images in video in different places around the world and see what's happening in our own city in a way where we would not have seen it before. So everything is live, everything is transmitted into the palm of our hand through our machines. People are getting their news not from television, but basically by following social media. And in social media, if you are interested in something or if you read a story of interest, let's say you're interested in about radical Islam, researching for your show, all of a sudden you start seeing more and more posts about that subject because the algorithm shows you, because they believe you are interested in this subject, so they show you what's happening around you, more information about that issue. And it's good and bad in one way. It is good because it makes us realize that there's an issue of importance that we need to start paying attention to, because it may be threatening to certain aspects of our life or our society. The bad thing about it is we are being exposed to things that we don't really understand, and we are trying to make sense of them. And in our way of making sense, like what you said in your introduction before you introduced me, when you played the clip of the guy talking about until we enter, and you said something about until we enter maybe the afterlife. What he is talking about is not the afterlife. The Arabic word is fatah, and fatah means entering and conquering a nation or a location or a community, that is subjugating it by killing its members until they convert to Islam and they declare that Islam is the only religion on earth. This is what that imam meant when he is speaking in America about we need to continue our jihad until we enter, until the Fatah. So they are talking about dominating, about subjugating, about declaring jihad in any way that they deem necessary in order for them to achieve their goal. Because in the world of Islam, you notice how he kept repeatedly talking about the ummah. In the ummah. In Dar al-Islam, the word Muhammad divided the world into two, Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb. The house of ummah, of the Islamic nation, where everybody believes that Islam is the only true religion on earth and everybody lives according to Islamic rule, like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, like the Islamic State, or the house of Dar al-Harb, the house of war, where Islam is at war with any nation or community that is not yet conquered and subjected to Islam. And that's what he's talking about, and that's where the danger is.
Now, this is a very good setup because I presented it this way because I feel that those that sympathize with the Palestinian people and those that sympathize with Hamas are not necessarily the same. I think many people that are compassionate say, oh my gosh, they're killing children, these children are dying in war, et cetera, et cetera. Anybody with a heart would care about that. But I think those that are specifically supporting Hamas and kind of their jihad against the Israelis and the Jews more specifically, I think this is something that we're seeing more of as well. And I believe this is why this guy, Mahmoud Khalil, has been taken into custody and is going to be deported. So I want to get your reaction to that controversy and the latest on that when we return. Amigos, we're coming right back with Brigitte Gabriel, national security analyst, New York Times bestselling author, and the head of Act for America, actforamerica.org. We're going to talk about her book as well when we return. Don't go anywhere. It's Rich Valdez coming right back with Brigitte Gabriel.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Khalil scored a partial victory when a federal judge kept alive his petition for release. The judge said this is indeed an exceptional case, and there is a need, the judge said, for careful judicial review. That review is just now going to be undertaken in New Jersey because that's where Khalil was brought almost immediately after his arrest. Khalil's wife recorded her husband as federal agents took him into custody at his Columbia student apartment. Within hours, the Palestinian activist was brought to a detention facility in Elizabeth, so that's why the judge moved his case to Jersey. The judge also affirmed that Khalil, at least for now, cannot be deported, as the Trump administration is seeking to do. The administration has said Khalil's continued presence in the U.S. could have adverse foreign policy consequences, but his lawyers say he has no criminal record and is being held over protected speech. He remains detained in Louisiana, where he's due before an immigration judge later this month.
That's Aaron Katersky with ABC News with the report there. And I want to continue on that same topic with our guest, Brigitte Gabriel. She's the head of Act for America, actforamerica.org. She's the author of the best-selling book, Rise. She hit the New York Times bestseller with that as well. And she's here with us now. Brigitte Gabriel, we know that this guy, Mahmoud Khalil, was the mastermind of this campus riot that in at one instance in New York City took hostage a janitor, a Dominican guy, and the guy who actually did the hostage taking was charged. But all of this was under the direction of Mr. Khalil. And I understand what the Trump administration is alleging and saying that there's a national security threat and there was actual consequences here. His attorneys seem to be doing an excellent job in painting the picture that he was just holding up some sort of cardboard placard and participating in a peaceful protest and exercising his First Amendment with no hostages taken, with no massive destruction or anything like that. And I want you to give me your assessment of this, because I haven't spoken to you since this whole thing ensued.
Well, these students are very dangerous, and he is a very dangerous person and organizer. He is a political activist, not a student. I think he's
right,
in his mid-30s. He's been there forever as a student. What Americans need to realize is the Muslim Student Organization, which is a Muslim student force on American college campuses, was started by the Muslim Brotherhood, the same Muslim Brotherhood that conquered Egypt. Remember the Arab Spring, where they took over Egypt, and finally we had a coup, and the army saved Egypt again? So the Student Muslim Association, which has more chapters on American college campuses than American Republican and Democrat organizations combined. These are the student agitators who are basically agents for foreign governments and foreign terrorist entities who are operating on college campuses, and they should be deported. On our website, on actforamerica.org, we have been working very closely with the Trump administration and basically deporting pro-Hamas visa holders and introducing legislation in Congress to deport these students. Do you know, Rich, that only 20% of these students on American elite universities are American-born? 80% are foreign students. This is why you are seeing the chaos that we are seeing on American college campuses. Those students are the enemies of the United States. They are agents for terrorist organizations, for foreign organizations, and every single one needs to be deported. We have an action item on our website, an Act Now campaign, directed to members of Congress and the leadership, including to your state legislators. We urge you to go take action. It has been signed by over 2 million people. 2,016,000 people have made phone calls, emails to Congress, signed petitions, posted on their social media. We have a whole campaign directed at our government and our leaders to deport these pro-Hamas visa holders. I urge you to go to actforamerica.org right now. Click on Act Now campaigns on our national campaigns. You'll see the petition, and make sure you sign up for our emails and action alerts. They're free. We want to keep you informed when the legislation is moving through Congress, so you can contact your elected official about the bill and make sure it passes. This is how we together can do something to protect our country. Go to actforamerica.org right now. And Rich, Every single one of these students need to be deported. This is the time when we need to come together and put pressure on the judges, on the elected officials in our community to make sure that every elected official and anybody who has a way to put pressure on the decision makers to make sure they make the right decision that will protect America and Americans instead of protecting terror agents operating in our country.
That's really well put. Very, very passionate statement. Folks, we're on with Brigitte Gabriel, the head of Act for America. actforamerica.org is the website. Go check it out and check out the petition as well. Brigitte, I want to make the distinction because I'm not sure I'm always very eloquent in this. And I made some comments yesterday that some people, I think, misconstrued. And as much as I may not like Nazis, I may not like racists, and I don't like terrorists, I have to stand by the First Amendment because I do this every day on these airwaves. I say what I want to say. And I believe if you want to say you don't like a certain race of people, that's fine. If you want to say you don't like a certain country, you don't like this country. Whatever your critique is, you're free to say what you want to say. And it's my belief that Mr. Khalil's argument that he's being held because of protected speech is a farce, because there's a lot of people out there that say they don't like America. There's a lot of people that say a lot of things, and they're not in jail and they're not in custody. He's the one that led this quote-unquote protest that the media is calling it, that ended up taking somebody hostage, a man that was fearing his life, and they wouldn't let him leave and harmed a lot of people. So I make this distinction, and not to you per se, but really for the sake of this conversation, because I feel that when you're saying to sign this petition, you're talking about people that are actively lending material support to terrorist organizations by way of being here, acting as agents or agent provocateurs, not someone who's just saying, yeah, you know what, Hamas has a point. I kind of like what they stand for, right?
People like you and me are the ones who talk about issues. We debate issues, and we may disagree on different issues, but we agree to disagree, walking away from the table, respecting each other. This is the difference between two people voicing their opinion and somebody like Khalil and those other students who are disrupting the peace, damaging property, and endangering people's lives. Today, in any movie theater in America, if you stand up and scream fire, and because you do that, you may endanger the lives of people who may stampede out of that theater and cause harm. Because of that, you will be thrown in jail. You will be arrested because you are disrupting the peace. So there's a big difference between people talking the way you and I are talking now, and even urging people, call your elected official. You can peacefully demonstrate if you wish to do so. You can go in front of city council. You can hold an American flag. You can stand there and you say, I respectfully ask you, Mr. City Council, Mrs. City Council, whatever, that you deport these students because we believe they are harming our country. There's a difference between doing that and by force taking over a campus building, setting buildings on fire, taking people hostage, beating people's skulls to the ground in order to harm them simply because they disagree with you or because they are Jews or because they are Americans supporting Israel. When things turn into violence and destruction of property, you cross the line from respectfully disagreeing and expressing your opinion to becoming a domestic terrorist causing harms and injuring or causing harm to Americans. That's the difference we're talking about.
Yeah, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I feel like the media does a real disservice to all Americans when they try to present the case as such as this is this man's free speech. This is not his free speech, right? It's no one's free speech. and that's the part that really just gets me going. The other part of it is we have to be very vigilant, right, from the level of informed patriots and really from the Trump administration who's in office now, to making sure that we continue this type of activity, right? If we continue to identify people that are a threat to the United States, then we have to act on that. And I find it very interesting, Brigitte Gabriel, that I wasn't born yesterday, right? I try to approach things very common, with a common sense approach. But the reality is, and I think you know this better than anybody because you've been doing this for a long time, when you have someone working on behalf of a foreign nation in another country, they don't come and say, hey, I'm a spy, or hey, I'm here to disrupt, right? They come, they look like professors, they look like other types of organizers and influencers, and they come to make an impact for whichever nation state they're representing. And that's, in fact, how spycraft works. And I feel like this is getting lost on the public.
It's getting lost on the public because in our country, we have become such a snowflake society, Rich, that everybody wears their feelings on their sleeves. And I believe we need to take political correctness and throw it in the garbage where it belongs and start calling a spade while we still can, so we can save and preserve our country. You know, people like me crossed oceans to come to America because I came here seeking freedom. I came here seeking justice. I came here to live in a country where I can say something and I don't have to worry about the Gestapo showing up in the middle of the night, kidnapping me and beheading me without my family knowing where I am. In America, we can express different opinions, but we have to abide by the law. We have to abide by the laws of the land. We have to respect our Constitution. We have to live by the Bill of Rights. We have the rights that our founding fathers and their wisdom gave us. We have all these rights, but there's a fine line between being afraid to say something lest you offend somebody and being able to watch the people who are destroying the country and you remain silent. You know, Edmund Burke said the only thing for evil to dwell is for good people to do nothing. And right now, the good people in our country sat on the sideline for so long, allowing the bad actors to misbehave, whether it's children through Antifa, doing damage without any parenting, any discipline, any respect to country, any respect to property. We have a new generation that has lost respect for anything decent. They have no values. And the people with values, like you and me and our listeners, are sitting on the sidelines, shaking our heads, thinking, how did we get to this point? And right now we have people who are afraid to speak because, what if somebody comes and does something to me? Or what if they think I'm a bigot or I'm a racist because I'm calling a spade a spade? Well, you know what? When you have terrorist agents operating in our country, you have to talk about terrorist agents operating in your country. Deception is their middle name. This is exactly what they're doing. And it's up to us to say, we love our country. We welcome any immigrant to our country. Look, I'm an immigrant, Rich. I'm a legal immigrant to the United States. I have brown skin. I look Middle Eastern. I sound Middle Eastern. Obviously, I have an accent. But you know what? I came here. I pledged my allegiance to the United States the day I stood in the federal courtroom, raised my hand to become a naturalized citizen, forsaken everything behind me, and becoming an American, pledging my loyalty to America. Those are the type of immigrants we want in our country. We welcome people to our country who are willing to respect who we are, respect our nation, respect our laws, and if they want to become Americans, we welcome them. If they do whatever is needed, the right way, the legal way to become an American, and then assimilate into our country and become a part of the American fabric. Not any other country, not any other nation. They pledge allegiance to America and they become American. This is what made America great. That's what made us the shining city on a hill. This is what made America the most amazing country in the world, is that people from all over the world, like me, can come here and be all we can be and build America and create jobs and pay our taxes and put money back into the country and create industries. But right now, the world America's turned upside down, and we are the last generation who remembers the greatness of America, who needs to say, enough is enough. We love everybody, but we respect ourselves and our country, and we welcome people who respect us.
Brigitte Gabriel, you are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. Everybody check out her website, BrigitteGabriel.com. Check out her other website, actforamerica.org. Brigitte, thank you for being here. God bless you, and hope to speak with you soon.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. Thank you, and please go to actforamerica.org and join us, sign up, partner with us. Together we can save America. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
My pleasure. Amen to that. Amigos, we come back with your phone calls, your thoughts, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5555. 833-4-VALDEZ-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We're going to the phones with your thoughts, opinions, and reactions to everything that's going on in the news today. And I want to go to Lorton, Virginia. I want to check in with Maria, who's on WMAL. Maria, go right ahead.
I just wanted to say that. And what city is she in? I am in Fairfax County, Virginia, Lorton, to be exact. And I just, she's so inspirational. But she's basically repeating what I always say. We welcome all immigrants from whatever country they come from. I came here a long time ago too. And, my country, and I'm more American than apple pie. I love America. And if I have to defend my country, I will do so. No matter what, I become, if I have to, I'll be taking my Uzi, and I really will defend our country.
God bless you, Maria. I love that. And I think, I believe most Americans feel the way you do. I really do. I think there's a lot of people in this country that have roots in other countries, and, whether they've assimilated, they haven't assimilated, whatever the case is, right? I think ultimately you've got a lot of people in this country that came here and like the country. And it doesn't mean they have to abandon where they came from. It doesn't mean a lot of things. But it means they love this country. And you have a small faction of people now that aren't so fond of the country. And they have a right to not be fond of the country, right? And I think this is part of where the contention comes from with people where, we're like, hey, if you don't like it, get out of here, right? Go back home. And I agree with that. But it doesn't mean that they're going to. And we have to deal with that type of dissent. So thank you for your kind words on our guest, Brigitte Gabriel. And I agree with you. I think this is what makes America great, is that we can all be here. We can all say what we want, do what we want, and we can all, part ways peaceably. And when we have people that don't play by the rules, then perhaps they shouldn't be here. And I think that's what, the outcome of this court case is going to ultimately determine. That I think the Trump administration is within its rights to do what it has to do. Maria in Lorton, Virginia, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. Thank you for your patriotism as well. I'm going to take a quick pause right here. Going to come right back to the rest of your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, to the phones we go. Rich Valdez keeping you company, working the night shift till midnight, 1 a.m. in some parts of the country. And I want to go to John, Nokesville, Virginia, WMAL. Again, let's go, John. Go for it.
Hi, Rich. Great show. I've been listening to you the last few weeks. Very happy about the great work you're doing there. Congratulations. The two issues you were talking about. I'm a financial advisor for 43 and a half years now. So I get to know people's salaries, and I've seen people go all the way through their careers. And what happens with the state employees and educators is they do start at the lower entry-level income. So it is true when they say, oh, they get paid less, but that's entry-level. But all federal, state, government, and teachers have automatic increases in income during their entire career. So it's not like the private sector where you got to get like
you got to earn your way up to the top. They end up retiring at the highest levels and getting a pension to match, Yeah, good point, John. I'm sorry the music is kicking us both out of here, but I appreciate your kind words. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you'll call back again soon. John in Nokesville, Virginia, listening on WMAL. And amigos, for some of you, this is the end of the road, but for everybody else, I'm coming back with another hour. So take care, good night, and God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of our program. We are live, we're national, looking to really expand on some of the news that's going on. Let me give you the phone number. It's 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. If you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, feel free to do it. I want to hear from you. And big news of the day, President Trump signed that executive order that he promised to effectively end or begin the ending of the Department of Education. Now, this is something I always say that I heard Reagan talk about as a kid. Big kudos to the great one, Mark Levin, and Mr. Producer, Rich Cementa, for this clip of audio. And Reagan, in his State of the Union back in 1982, talked about how so many of these entitlement programs were rife with fraud. Listen to this.
Today, we face the absurd situation of a federal budget with 3/4 of its expenditures routinely referred to as uncontrollable. And a large part of this goes to entitlement programs. Committee after committee of this Congress has heard witness after witness describe many of these programs as poorly administered and ripe with waste and fraud. Virtually every American who shops in a local supermarket is aware of the daily abuses that take place in the food stamp program, which has grown by 16,000% in the last 15 years. Another example is Medicare and Medicaid, programs with worthy goals, but whose costs have increased from $11.2 billion to almost $60 billion, more than 5 times as much in just 10 years. Waste and fraud are serious problems. Back in 1980, federal investigators testified before one of your committees that corruption has permeated virtually every area of the Medicare and Medicaid healthcare industry. One official said many of the people who were cheating the system were very confident that nothing was going to happen to them. Well, something is going to happen. Not only the taxpayers are defrauded, the people with real dependency on these programs are deprived of what they need because available resources are going not to the needy, but to the greedy. The time has come to control the uncontrollable.
Of course, that is President Reagan, the 40th President of the United States, dubbed Ronaldus Magnus by the late, great El Rushbo. And he's right. He's right. I mean, Reagan had a way of speaking and making everything make sense. And he was right when he said, well, something's going to happen. Not only the taxpayers are defrauded, the people with the real dependency on these programs are deprived of what they need because available resources are not going to the needy, but to the greedy. The time has come to control the uncontrollable. Man, I wish I could have had a command of the English language like Reagan did. I mean, these are beautiful words. And it's in effect what I took 10 or 12 minutes explaining, at the top of the other hour was exactly that. It's the bureaucrats. It's the I don't want to say overpaid, but I want to say abundant administrators in education in particular that really reap the rewards of this while saying it's for the kids. It's for the kids. It's not for the kids. And I say this as somebody who's worked in higher education and post-secondary education, career education. And today, I was part of the founders group of a charter school in Jersey City, New Jersey, many years ago, like 10, 12 years ago, and just had our board meeting tonight before the show. And this is what we do, policy and budgets. And I can tell you, you can get by without the federal money. The federal money's great, really great when it comes in. And for most schools, I don't think there's going to be any impact on that. But even if there were to be an impact on that, that just means as they're trimming fat in Washington, we have to learn to trim fat elsewhere. And that doesn't mean that your kid suffers per se. I've never seen a kid that was like, oh my gosh, we no longer have an assistant superintendent for X, Y, and Z programs. What are we going to do now? Right? There is a bloated structure of hierarchical structure for people in education, in public education in particular, that you won't see duplicated in private schools, parochial schools, et cetera. You just don't see it. Now, of course, the argument can be made, well, we have way more students than you. Okay, granted, you do. But you still don't need this, in my opinion, duplicative amount of work, of workers in that middle administration role. I just think it's a lot. And something the caller made in the previous hour was a comment that he made was right. That and in some cases they may start low and then go high, but these are automatic raises that are built into these contracts negotiated by the union. And it'd be great if everybody got that, right? Wouldn't it be great? Most people have to sit for a performance review, some sort of appraisal, where they're like, oh, yeah, right. Well, let's see what your work was this year, and let's see, what type of money we can get you. And that's not a foreign concept. That is what people expect. When you work somewhere where you think, well, next year my raise goes, I get a 3.5 as per my contract. So, we could probably, maybe do. That's fine. I'm not envious of you. I'm really not. I'm just saying it's not a realistic look for everyone else. And you can't act like, oh my gosh, woe is me, when that gravy train dries up, when the majority of the rest of the world has to earn their keep in that way, right? Consistently, every year. Got to show you what I'm doing well, doing more, doing better. It's a rat race. And I guess the argument to me would be, well, you're the idiot that wants to climb the corporate ladder. I did the right thing. I just get in and I just exist and I subsist. Who's smarter than me? And maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong for looking at things meritoriously. But anyway, Reagan was very prescient with his comments, and Trump is, in my opinion, leaving a tremendous legacy. I'm hopeful that Congress will support that vision to start to shrink government, and hopefully this isn't the end. Right? There's hopefully more agencies that can fall by the wayside. Ultimately, I think our federal government is too big. I think that the United States Treasury could, in fact, replace the Federal Reserve. I don't know that we necessarily need a central bank, at least not the Federal Reserve. And, that's where I get like Ron Paul and say, hey, end the Fed. Anyway, there's so much to discuss tonight. There's a lot that we're going to get into. Just to give you a little sneak peek at some of the conversation we're going to have. We had some conversation about radical Islamists and their pro-Hamas views. And this hour, I want to get into some of the other side of the free speech when they come at people for just doing just that, right? That's the argument that Mahmoud Khalil is making, that you're coming after me because I was saying I like Hamas and I don't like Israel. That's not true, because there are thousands of people that have opinions like that, and none of them are being detained and potentially deported. Why? Because there's Nazis out there that say bad things. There's racists out there that say bad things. Lots of people say bad things. And that's kind of how it works in this country. But we don't go calling the cops on them and hoping that the cops will show up and create what's called a swatting incident, right? Where you end up looking like the bad guy when you're really the victim. So I want to get into that. We're going to talk a little bit about what swatting is and a couple of conservative influencers and radio hosts have been the targets of swatting, and one of them is going to join us straight ahead. And after that, I want to talk about the burden that puts on the FBI, because I think that's, and on law enforcement in general. Oftentimes, the cops don't know. I was looking at a thread on Twitter. Dan Bongino, the deputy director of the FBI, made some comments about the stance that the Bureau is taking and into investigating these incidents of swatting, echoing and supporting what Director Kash Patel said. And some of the comments in the thread were that, from the victims, were that when I spoke to the cops, they had no idea this was going on. And obviously, the cops aren't going in there thinking that they're swatting someone. They're thinking they're going in there to do what they're supposed to do. And that's why this is dangerous. And it puts people in harm's way. And I don't know that any conservatives are doing this, but I think it's pretty much exclusively being done by the radical left towards conservatives. And if I'm wrong, please fact check me. But these crazy lefties that are doing this type of thing, this can get somebody killed. Now, maybe that's their goal, but that doesn't make it right. We're going to talk about swatting straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
My hands across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
You've seen all the headlines.
Nikki Haley revealing her South Carolina home was a target of swatting.
Jack Smith was also the victim of an attempted swatting. Swatting.
What is swatting? Swatting is an attempt to initiate a large armed police response to a specific location. Someone calls the local police and falsely claims that there's some violent act occurring at that location. It's an attempt to intimidate and harass a specific target, and the numbers are rising. I think because we seem to be at a place in society where some people think it's perfectly fine to lash out, even dangerously, at someone just because they have a different opinion.
Just because they have a different opinion. People are getting the cops to respond to things where these guys are coming in with body armor on, hoping to go home alive to their significant others and their families. And this is not a game. It's not a game at all. And to think that people that do what I do, right? People that are on the radio, people that are streaming a show, people that are out there commenting on the news of the day, commenting on their beliefs about America, are being targeted this way. Now, you'll know a couple of weeks back, my nephew graduated from the Tennessee State Police. And I did the show from Music City in Nashville, from the Cumulus Studios there. Big shout out to everybody there that made that possible. And while I was there, I had an in-studio guest, somebody who's a New Yorker like me, who was part of the Long Island Loud Majority, and now he's the host of the Ungoverned podcast on LFA-TV. You could catch it on rumble.com every day. Shawn Farash does a heck of Trump impersonation, and he's a great impressionist. And we had a great conversation, and a lot of good feedback, too, from our listeners. And looking at Twitter today, I see that he's yet another of these conservative media figures out there that's been swatted, like my buddy Joe Pags. And this is alarming to me because, A, it shouldn't happen to anybody, but B, not to my boys. Shawn Farash, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Rich. It's been a wild week. It really has been crazy. And I'm just happy that this story is getting the attention that it deserves from other content creators, radio hosts, and folks speaking the truth out there in the conservative movement, as well as the Department of Justice, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security and our local law enforcement. Everyone's taking this pretty seriously, and it should be, because somebody can get very hurt.
No question. Now, Shawn Farash, I want you to really, I'm sure you've told this story 1,000 times, but I want you to tell everybody listening now exactly how this whole thing started. Walk us through.
All right. So a week ago, so those last Thursday, it doesn't even feel like a week, honestly. It feels like it happened yesterday. It's still pretty fresh in our minds, but last Thursday, I was doing my show, and a little while before that, I saw that Nick Sorter, who's a conservative podcaster, his family, not podcaster, conservative reporter and an independent journalist, his family was swatted the previous night. Gunther Eagleman, another account I follow on X, was swatted. So I saw that this was, starting to happen. Chase Geiser of InfoWars. I started to see that there was a rise in this whole thing. So it was in the back of my head, but Thursday progressed like a normal Thursday would. And, we got back from a few errands that my wife and I had done, and we went in the backyard. We started tearing down an old fence in the property we just bought. And, it was great. It was really, it was a nice day. It was a beautiful day. And I was tired. I took a maybe 20, 30-minute nap on the couch, and my wife comes in and wakes me up and goes, there are cops in our backyard with guns. And I knew exactly. She sounded very scared. As she should be. Why the hell is this happening? And I knew at that moment that we were, the next to be swatted. So I told her we're being swatted, and she didn't know what that meant. Thought it was a January 6th thing. Thought that I was going to get ripped out of the house and taken to jail, and the house is going to be turned upside down. And we have 3 cats, right? We don't want them to get hurt or get let out or anything, crazy there. And so, I said, no, here's what's going to happen, right? There was most likely a false call that came in. Somebody said that some gruesome crime happened in the house, because I've heard of stories that's happened to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tim Pool. I've heard of this happening, a lot over the last couple of years. So I explained exactly what was going to happen, and that we're going to follow all of the instructions the local police gives us, because those are the guys with the guns, and they had them pointed at our house. They were in our backyard pointing guns at our house. I'd never been down barrel of a gun before. I had never been had guns pointed at me before. I practice firearm safety whenever I'm holding a gun. The barrel is only pointed, downrange, and downrange is something I intend to shoot. And I know that that's the rule. So I know that them cops are, pointing the guns at our house. If we gave them a reason, they would have pulled the trigger, right? If they thought that their lives were in danger. You mentioned, your nephew just graduated, and he's a law enforcement officer here in Tennessee. And his goal at the end of every day is to go home, right? So I said, we're going to follow the instructions. We're going to show these police officers that, what they heard on their 911 call is not true. And then we'll go ahead and resolve it. So I received a phone call from them before they did anything, and they asked if we were in the home. And I said, yes. Who else is in the home? And I said, my wife, 3 cats. I told them what they heard was not true. And we walked outside. We got patted down. We got sat on the driveway. They cleared the house, and then we talked to them after the fact about what happened. But this is not something that I would wish on anybody, because at that moment, you're in control of your actions. You know what I mean? I knew exactly how to act. I knew what to tell my wife and how to act. We knew we had to stay calm. But I could not control how much sleep any of the officers got the night before. And I love my law enforcement officers. I love the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office. They handled it amazing, but I'd never interacted with them before. I don't know who's having a bad day.
Did they know what was going on? Did they know swatting was happening?
They didn't know whether or not this was a hoax or not. They treated it as if it was not. So,
right.
The road was shut down because they had to. But they did, when we were sitting down, explain this could be one of these, swatting incidents where they'd heard about it before with gamers.
Wow.
It was terrible, though. It was a very, very unnerving experience.
Folks, check him out on X at Shawn_Farash, and check out his show Ungoverned on LFA-TV. Shawn Farash, thanks for being here, brother. Godspeed to you, and I pray all is well with you and your wife.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it.
You bet, brother. Amigos, keep it locked right here. We come back for the law enforcement response. Don't go anywhere.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
FBI Director Kash Patel condemned a surge in swatting attacks, false emergency calls leading to armed police raids, targeting conservative media figures. Declaring that weaponizing law enforcement is morally reprehensible, Patel vowed federal action to hold perpetrators accountable. Victims include Chase Geyser, Joe Paggs, and Nick Sorter, whose father was falsely reported as a murderer, prompting a dangerous police response. Patel emphasized that this is not about politics and pledged full cooperation with local authorities to prevent further politically motivated harassment. The crackdown aims to safeguard free speech and deter abuse of law enforcement resources.
Well, there's the report on that. And I want to remind you, Open Phones Across America is going to start right now, just moments away, 833-4-VALDEZ. But I want to get some reaction to this from someone who represents police all across the country. She is the spokesperson for the National Police Association, retired Sergeant Betsy Brantner-Smith. Welcome back, ma'am.
Hey, it's so great to be with you, and what a crazy topic we're talking about tonight, swatting. It's so dangerous.
Now, listen, I've never been swatted, thank God, knock on wood, all of that. But you may have had some experience with this in your time as a cop and in your time with the National Police Association. Tell us more.
So we had over a dozen conservative influencers, Rich, in the last week or so, swatted. And what swatting is, and I was a hostage negotiator, I was a watch commander, so I've been to these type of incidents. What these people do is they use a series of internet switches, if you will, to eventually call 911 in a certain area, and then they report. Probably the most famous person last week was Juanita Broderick, famously a alleged victim of Bill Clinton. Somebody called and said that she was being held hostage. They pretended to be her. What happens is the police show up, they surround the home, and when these are conservative, especially conservative influencers, presumably those people probably have firearms, Rich, and so what they're trying to do is to create a situation where law enforcement uses force against what is actually the victim, or the victim, not knowing they're a victim, uses force against law enforcement, not knowing they're law enforcement, and you end up with an absolute disaster on your hands. And that is what has been happening to these many conservative influencers. And it's just so dangerous. So the National Police Association said, you know what, we got to come out. We got to make a statement about this. We did. Thankfully, Director Kash Patel of the FBI jumped right on it, as did Kristi Noem, and as are other news outlets, and of course you, because you're one of the most pro-law enforcement news outlets in the nation.
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, I think this is incredibly important because this is, I don't know how to put it, but this is the left doing what only they know how to do so brilliantly, which is to use the system to destroy the system. And it's very Stalin-esque. And here we are, right? You've got the cops going after their biggest supporters, the conservatives and media, and coming in with the guns blazing because they think there might be guns blazing. And rightfully so, right? On every angle here, because you're not going to go into something taking it easy when you hear, like, for Shawn Farash, who was just on right before you, they said that it was a murder-suicide, and it was a suicide by cop. So they were expecting this guy to pull out a gun on the cop so he could kill them. I mean, it was a horrible and horrific situation to be in, and I'm glad that they were able to, de-escalate it quickly. But you're right; these things can become gruesome and very quickly. What, I guess, is there advice that you can offer to people that are afraid of being swatted, or is there advice you could offer to those in law enforcement about maybe vetting these things a little better? What's the first step?
Well, the first step is awareness, of course, by law enforcement. And here's the thing, and I've explained this to many of my conservative influencer friends. They've called their local police department and said, I'm worried about being swatted. And the local police department says, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. I don't really follow anybody on X. So we're asking local law enforcement to know who is in your community, who is in your area. So we're asking conservative influencers, if you think you might be in danger of being swatted, go to your local law enforcement, show them a couple of examples, explain to them what you do for a living, that you're part of conservative media, and then if you are swatted, which presumably it'll be 2 a.m, and what you need to do is call 911 yourself, say, here I am, here's where I am, I believe law enforcement has surrounded my home, I'm not being held hostage, I'm not trying to kill my spouse, whatever it is, and we ask people to communicate very succinctly, very calmly, and then do what law enforcement tells you to do, which you can go on X and look at all these videos of these influencers who are being brought out by, at gunpoint, and do what cops tell you to do, whether it's, stand on your head or get on your knees or whatever it is, and then work it out later. But communication is key by both law enforcement and the potential swatting victim.
Folks, we're on with Sergeant Betsy Brantner-Smith. She's the spokesperson for the National Police Association. And Sarge, this is, again, of concern and obviously of concern to those in my business and whatnot. But this has been going on for a while, and this is a terrible practice, but one of those things that, like you said, we kind of have to be prepared for.
Well, it has been going on. This is nothing new. It's been going on for years. And, we're kind of victims of our own ability to communicate, right? You're able to go online, and you can, a lot of our people in the United States have been swatted by people who are in other countries. There are, I don't want to explain how to do it, but there are different switches, if you will, where you can be in California and you can swat somebody in Florida, for example, and it's very difficult for law enforcement to trace these things back because there is layer after layer after layer of internet communications, if you will. And this is why we thought it was so important to urge Director Patel to get involved, because a lot of times your local police department, Rich, doesn't have the resources, the technology to properly investigate this. So if we make this a national issue, then I think that we will resolve it faster. Conservative influencer Cat Turd, a lot of people know who he is. He was swatted 3 times late last year, and he's a guy who lives out in the country. He basically lives on a ranch, and yet he was swatted 3 times. But the FBI was able to arrest somebody in that case. So I think
now,
that
what do they arrest them for? Is that terrorism?
Well, that's a really good question. If we can get federal charges approved, which I think will be, easier now under Pam Bondi, then, but there's really no terrorism statute for this, but you can use different, using the internet to commit a crime. There's statutes for that. What we would like to see, quite frankly, it's just about attempted murder. So we'd like to see felonies, at least, when you charge somebody. So being able to charge them with a federal crime is going to be better than a local crime. But, all kinds of things like disorderly conduct, depending on the state that you do it in, using technology to commit a battery, things like that. Fraud, there's all kinds of things you can charge people with. It goes state to state, and of course then there's county and as well as federal charges involved. But we may need to, I'm kind of a small government person, but we may need to look at specific legislature to address swatting if it does continue to become a problem.
Yeah, and the reason I asked about that was only because I remember I did a police reserve police academy in New Jersey, and I remember the definition that they gave us was, using fear and intimidation to coerce people to do something was the definition of terrorism under the New Jersey state statute. And I thought that sounds like what they're doing. They're using the police to put fear and intimidation and coerce somebody to stop talking. And it sounds like terrorism to me. I'm sure you could probably attach a million other charges, if you wanted to. But I'm just thinking, you got to catch one or two of these bad guys and make a huge example of them so that this type of thing, becomes a rarity.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's the thing is what these swatters are doing, these terrorists are trying to get these influencers to stop talking, to stop reporting the news. One of the things that President Trump has done is he has brought in, more, or I should say less mainstream influencers, alternative media, if you will, into the White House press corps, and that is enraging people. And the same people who are doing the swatting are the same people who are setting fire to your Tesla and all that kind of stuff. It's just we have insanity, left-wing insanity happening now. When conservatives didn't decide we didn't want to drink Bud Light anymore, we didn't burn down the Bud Light distillery. We
Right.
just stopped buying it. I didn't burn down my local Target. I just stopped going there. But we're seeing a whole different type of reaction from the left, and it includes swatting.
It's terrible. Folks, we're on with Sergeant Betsy Brantner-Smith, spokesperson for the National Police Association. And Sarge, I want you to let everybody know how they can follow you and how they can keep up to speed with everything you're doing.
Everybody go to nationalpolice.org, nationalpolice.org, see all the great stuff we're doing. And you can follow us on X at Nat Police Assoc, and you can follow me at Sergeant Betsy Smith and see all the great stuff that we're doing for law enforcement and the people who support us.
Sarge, I want to thank you for being here. You are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I appreciate it. Godspeed to you.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Anytime. And amigos, your thoughts, your calls, and reactions are coming up right now. Open phones across America, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, to the phones we go. I want to go to our buddy in Eugene, Oregon on KUGN. Looks like there's something wrong with the phone line. Give us a call back. Anyway, we'll continue. We'll continue to Saratoga, New York, and check in with Jane. Jane, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. Okay, where do I begin? First of all, growing up in Miami, Florida, these maniacs are all about control. They do not care.
Which maniacs are you talking about?
The left.
Oh, and, all of them. Okay.
I remember this is how my brother lost his life. I mean, my daddy told me when I was a young woman, and that's not even why I called. I'll get to it in a minute, I promise. Sure. He said to me, Pinky, that was my nickname, because I never got a tan. I just turned pink. He said, Pinky, when you go out into the world, sweetheart, you're going to go down that road of life, and you're going to have a choice to make. And when you have to stop and make a turn and pursue life, he said, make sure you turn right. And he was right. And he worked for a Democratic politician. And that's how my brother lost his life. And these people, I mean, I was an abuse counselor in Vermont.
For kids.
You know that.
Yeah.
And Bernie Sanders, he strikes out to strike fear in people's hearts. That's what he does. If I would find them a job, the first thing he would do is step in and say, oh, you're going to take that job? Go ahead. But we'll take everything away from you if you don't do what we want.
Yeah. Well, you're right. This is how the left operates. And before we wrap, I wanted to make sure you got a chance to weigh in on the swatting and or the other stuff that we were talking about, the Department of Ed, et cetera.
Right. What we have to do when we go into an area, we have to go and be open and honest with the police force and say, you might run into me here or there. Don't make all the challenges on the back of the cops. And
yeah,
that's not fair because they are coming into a place to save people. And these idiots are going to make it look like it's much more violent than it is. So go into a place, go to the local cops and say, okay, this is who I am, and this is what you may see me come in for this reason or that, and get them on your side. And you'll find out most cops are really good guys.
Oh, yeah. I don't think this is about the cops being bad guys in any way, and I don't think you were suggesting that either. I think this is the left being crazies and taking good people and making them do difficult things that they have to do. That's their job. Jane in Saratoga, New York, Paul Vandenberg Country, WGDJ. Thank you for that. And we're going to continue with the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, to the phones we go. Let's see. We've got Alice, Atlanta, Georgia, WGKA. Alice, go for it quickly. Speed round.
Hey, well, I just wanted to say that I and my daughter are a stalking victim. We're not stalking, but a swatting victim or victims. We were swatted 10 years ago on Christmas Day.
Wow.
In our case, they called the fire department and called in an emergency to the fire department, and my daughter and I are having Christmas dinner, and we see flashing red lights through the curtains of the living room window, and my daughter says, something's going on outside. I think they're here for us for some reason, and so I go out the door and go down the driveway and end up talking to a fireman who's coming up my driveway wanting to know what the emergency is.
Yeah, unbelievable. You know, it's whoever your enemies are, your critics, whether it's the left or others, it's a hateful thing to do. It really is. You know, whatever happened to the days of really just telling people in their face, right? Or get on the radio, say, hey, I don't like you or what you're doing. It's terrible. Alice, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Shout out to everybody in Atlanta, Georgia, WGKA. Let's go down to Orlando, Florida. John is streaming the show. John, go right ahead, quickly.
Yeah, hey, I think that we should go ahead and go on to YouTube and check out this thing called the wrap-up smear. I don't know if you ever heard of it or not, but it's got basically Nancy Pelosi's on C-SPAN admitting how the Democrats lie and slander their target, and then they contact the news media and they merchandise it and spread it around, and that's how they do it. And
this is like politics 101, right? It's kind of how political rhetoric works. And I remember that, the wrap-up smear. And, yeah, she was given like a master class on how political rhetoric in Washington works. It's a good clip. I recommend people see the full interview if possible. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Shout out to you and everybody in Orlando, Florida. And we got people on hold, and we're coming back. Another action-packed hour of, I like to say, stimulating talk. Anyway, your thoughts and calls and more are coming up. And no more Department of Ed, or at least the beginning of that. We're going to talk about that straight ahead. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of the program, 7 minutes after 11 o'clock Eastern Time, New York time, and I'm happy to be here with you. Blessed to be on this mic with you guys. The phone number, if you want to join our late-night national town hall conversation, give me a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez, and so much has gone on today, right? Of course, we were talking about the swatting incidents that occurred against some conservative influencers. And we, a little while ago, spoke with Shawn Farash, a friend of mine from New York, does his show. He moved out to Tennessee not that long ago. And he was swatted along with Joe Pags and a bunch of other independent journalists that are very popular on X, and here's a little bit of what he'd been saying in the media. Check this out.
Hey guys, it's Shawn, my wife Brennan, and just wanted to give you guys an update. We did just get swatted here in Tennessee. The officers said they received a phone call that somebody murdered somebody in the house and was planning a suicide by cop. So I received the call with that information. We cooperated with police. They were very nice.
They were actually very nice.
Very, very nice. They were not aware that this was going on across the country.
And we also had some additional conversation about, what we can do about it. And it really seems like there's not a ton you can do except, I think, catch the bad guys. Once you catch the bad guys that are doing this stuff, then, and only then, when you make an example of them, and show them, what it looks like, that they'll probably stop. It's my belief, my hope. AG Pam Bondi, she also put out a statement today talking about some arrests that were made in people that torched a bunch of Teslas. And again, another act of trying to silence people they don't like. This is terrorism. I don't care what, by the textbook definition. This is exactly that, right? Using fear, violence, intimidation to coerce people. And just imagine that, burning cars that belong to a dealership because you don't like that Musk, switched up on you. Because that's really what it is, right? It's not that they don't like Musk. They love Musk. They're upset that he went with El Trompito and that he's running around the White House wearing a suit jacket, a T-shirt, and jeans. And a MAGA hat. And he's running around with his little kid, right? They hate it. They hate it so much. And it's because they hate you. And this is problematic for them. Problematic that Trump is trying to figure things out differently than the swamp traditionally does. And with that, President Trump announcing today that he has abolished, or he's going to abolish, the Department of Ed with an executive order that begins that. Last week, there was a report about firing half of the staff. And this was great, right? You cut the department in half. Now it's the job of the secretary to continue going through that process of dwindling it down until it doesn't exist anymore. And that doesn't mean that some of the functions will disappear. That means that they'll be handled better, right? Some of the things that occurred with this Department of Education, which operates no schools and doesn't, do much for anything else. Part of what they've become in recent history is a bank, right? It's a bank. They now manage and service student loans that President Obama, in effect, bought from banks. And this was a crazy thing, but I understand it because this is how they were going to do DEI. This is how they were going to inform the minds. In effect, this is the re-education camp of the color revolution, the cultural revolution, right? This is it. But instead of being put in a concentration camp, you're given the illusion of choice, because you have choice whether you want to go or not. But you're pushed. You're pushed to go. And then when you get there, they give you any one of a myriad of things you could study. Not necessarily things that might change the world. No, we want things that are going to change your world. Like gender studies, like women's studies, like I had this audio clip a while back where it's a bunch of graduates, black and Hispanic women, that are saying, "Hi, my name is whatever, and I graduated today with a degree." And some of these degrees, these majors, were so specific. Like, I graduated with a degree in queer and biracial studies. What do you do with such a degree? Really? And if you're coming up with an answer right now for me, you're part of the problem. You don't do anything with that kind of degree. Nothing at all. And I can tell years ago, you know where you would go with a degree like that? To a place called Blockbuster Video. And you would end up with a job there. Because nobody is really hiring those people. Now, you can say, no, Rich, you're so ignorant. You are so filled with hate that you can't see what's happening. Okay, sure, I'll go. I'll take this bait. Where do you go? Nowhere. Because to teach in college those same silly topics, you've got to have a terminal degree, or at least a master's level degree. So you're going right back to school to learn more of that crazy. You think you're going to get a job as a director of DEI somewhere? I doubt it. They're probably going to hire some lawyer to do that, or somebody who has university level experience. So either way, with the baccalaureate degree in gender studies or African American studies and women's studies, specifically concentrating on the Caribbean diaspora, good luck. Good luck getting a job with a degree and a major nobody cares about. Now, the truth is, being a college graduate will help you get a job in most cases. They don't care what you studied or where you studied, right? They just want, you have a 4-year degree. That means you know how to make a sentence. You've done a few research papers, and you know how to commit to following through. Super. Love that. And I think that's great, too. I always encourage education. But when it's something so specific and so radicalized and something that offers so little benefit other than you helping people to understand this new perspective where all you do is criticize the patriarchy and look at the world through the lens of someone that says, I don't really need men anymore. Men are obsolete now. We used to need men because we couldn't get loans in the bank. We used to need men because we couldn't vote. We used to need men because we couldn't own property. But now we can go to school. We can become doctors, lawyers, professors, all sorts of things. We don't need men for anything. What kind of society do we continue to be if women don't need men? Men have never purported to not needing women. They always need women, right? For the sake of procreation, if nothing else, we need each other. So anyway, that was part of my long-winded way of saying we don't need a lot of this stuff. And I'm so glad that the Department of Education is on its way to becoming extinct. Now, a couple of months back, we had a superintendent on the radio show to talk about what was going on in his home state, because he was taking fire because he had stood up to the DEI woke mafia. And we've invited him back to talk about his reaction to President Trump signing this executive order. So we're going to do that. And of course, your calls and so much more straight ahead. Keep it locked right here.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Today we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all.
That, of course, El Trompito, President Trump, the 45th and 47th President of these United States, Donaldus Magnus, taking a step that President Reagan foretold but never crossed the finish line with. I'm glad that we're at the executive order step of the game. Can't wait till we're at the congressional vote. And I want to talk about this with Ryan Walters. He is the superintendent of schools in Oklahoma State, former Oklahoma Secretary of Education, and he was a teacher. So he knows a thing or two about this stuff. Ryan Walters, so let me get this straight. You're here, you're up in arms because you can't believe that they're doing away with the Department of Education. Is that right?
I'm telling you, I've been cheering for joy all day on this one. I think this is huge. I think you're going to see this is a moment, in American history that changed the trajectory of the country. We are going to be going from a direction where our schools were teaching our kids to hate this country, to hate our history, to hate what brings us together and unifies us as Americans, to a country that goes, hey, no, we actually want communities involved. We want parents involved. We want to bring education back to the states, not run by Marxist bureaucrats in D.C. So President Trump has, again, put a monumental moment in American history here by dismantling the Department of Education.
Superintendent Walters, I agree with what you're saying, and I want you to dig into that a little bit because, for people like me, I look at it as a I'm going to call it a civil rights issue, right? I think it really is a national security issue. I think it's an issue on so many fronts. But you said it's going to change the trajectory of our country. And I really believe that to be true because I believe the red tape and the bureaucracy that we had at the federal level was really harming the country in so many ways, not the least of which was culturally, which you know plenty about. But talk to us about why you had that word choice, changing the trajectory of our country.
Yes, sir. So let's take a look back to when the Federal Department of Education was created. So it was in the 1970s under Jimmy Carter. Now, what we saw from that point on is if you look back in American history, what did education look like? You're going to go back to, your listeners are going to remember the one-room schoolhouses, the community schools, teachers embedded in the community, families, communities, very integrated in their school system. It shared their values. Then in the 1970s, when you began to have this DC-run education model, where, again, it's not just the Federal Department of Education, it is your teachers' unions that become the apparatus, the arm of the Federal Department of Education. That was their number one ask of Jimmy Carter, was to create them a Federal Department of Education. So those two things linked up to drive an ideology into our schools, to take away parents' rights, to require more reliance on the bureaucratic state. And so what you see is this is the birthplace of Common Core, of DEI, of CRT, of a transgender ideology. All of this emerged from the Federal Department of Education. And what do you see? You see schools that you're going, how in the world are the schools that divorced from the values of the country, of our communities? Well, that's really where that impetus came from. And now under President Trump, I believe you're going to see this as a moment where, again, schools go back to being embedded in their community, sharing those community values, understanding that if you don't have parents on your side, this doesn't work. You, of course, have to be working with parents. Parents should be the number one decision maker in their kids' education. God gave kids to parents, not to bureaucrats, not to systems, but to parents, to families. And I think you're going to see that trajectory change on this day.
Ryan Walters, Oklahoma State Superintendent. I want to ask you a question. As the superintendent of schools in your state, why are you not up in arms about losing all of the funding that's going to be coming from the federal government?
Let me tell you, President Trump is doing a great job of articulating what this is going to mean for states. So, first of all, these bureaucrats in D.C. don't have a clue about what education looks like in classrooms in Oklahoma. What they do is that, again, they're all left-wing ideologues that are there to push an agenda. So guess what? When they send money to states, when they give resources to states, it always comes with strings. And the strings not only have left-wing ideology tied to them, but they force states to spend money to grow bureaucracy. We were looking at this. We just did a study a couple years ago that said, for every dollar we take from the feds, they're almost requiring 30 to 40 cents of us to invest in their bureaucracy. So we've got to hire more people to do the paperwork, more people to administer the funds. And you start going, hey, this isn't money for classrooms. This isn't money for education. It's money for bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
And because remember, all those bureaucrats up there, not only is President Trump cutting their salaries and allowing that funding to be spent on actual education, but remember, every single one of those bureaucrats are justifying their jobs by pushing regulations, rules, and procedures down on the states, down on teachers, down on the classrooms. And so he's eliminating all of those costs. So I think it's going to be a tremendous advantage to the states. We cannot wait to see what education looks like post-Department of Education.
Amigos, we're on with Ryan Walters, Oklahoma State Superintendent. He's the former Education Secretary for the state of Oklahoma. And, you know, Ryan Walters, I love what you're saying because you say it so much better than I do. But that's exactly it. People are really up in arms. Oh, we're going to lose school lunch. No, school lunch comes from the Department of Agriculture, whatever funding that they put through there. Oh, we're going to lose this. And I tell people, look, you know, I'm not an expert on things the way you are in your state, but I helped start a charter school, and I've been on the board since founding it 12, 13 years ago. And I can tell you that we've gotten money through grants from the federal government. And what you just said is so true. When you talk about the reports that go with reporting on those grants, you have to hire more people. So when you start talking about the money you're getting in versus what it costs you to manage, there's a question there. Now, there's a lot less flexibility. We can't turn around. We're not the state, right? So we're a charter operating within the state. So we can't really say we don't want this or we don't want that. But ultimately, there are a lot of strings attached. There is a tremendous amount of bureaucracy. And one thing I can always say is that some of it may reach the students, but very little. Oftentimes, it really just dies with the administration. And nothing against you. You're a professional educator that works in government, but I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. You know, there's you, and I don't know how many assistant superintendents you have, but I could tell you if this were Jersey, you'd have a dozen. And I don't know what work the 12 assistant superintendents do, and that's part of my biggest issue with the way this money comes in and how it's spent.
Well, and let me give you an example. So when I won my election here in the state of Oklahoma and became the superintendent over all of our schools, one of the first things I did was I fired 150 people from our agency. I was going, why in the world is this bureaucracy so big? Why do we have so many people? I want money to go to tutoring. We launched the largest tutoring initiative in state history. I said, I want money to go to merit pay. We launched merit pay for teachers, but we were able to do so much of that because we eliminated bureaucracy. What President Trump is going to do is that times 100. I mean, when you talk about eliminating that bureaucracy, what you're doing is getting all of that out of the way where we can go back to the basics in education, reading, writing, arithmetic, science, real history, and a history that actually wants our kids to be patriotic. We're unapologetic about that in Oklahoma, and so is President Trump. We want patriotic Americans. The only way America will continue to be the greatest country in the history of the world is if our young people are educated in the principles the country was founded on, so that they know the values, they know what made America great, they understand our history.
Amen to that. Ryan Walters, stick with me. We're coming right back to you because you said something I want to follow up on. Merit pay for tutoring and for teachers. I think this is remarkable. Don't know how you did that with a teachers union. I want to hear about that when we come back. Folks, we're coming right back with Ryan Walters, Oklahoma State Superintendent. I'm Rich Valdez.
Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
But we're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs, and this is a very popular thing to do, but much more importantly, it's a common sense thing to do, and it's going to work. Absolutely, it's going to work, and I can tell you from dealing with the governors and others in the state, They want it so badly. They want to take their children back and really teach their children individually. Probably the cost will be half, and the education will be maybe many, many times better.
That, of course, President Trump today announcing his executive order dismantling the Department of Education, which will then go before Congress for a vote to actually eliminate the agency. And this is great news, in my opinion, but we're getting some reaction from a state superintendent of schools. President Trump, again, echoing that this should go back to the states, and Superintendent Ryan Walters from the state of Oklahoma is with us. Superintendent Ryan Walters, you mentioned that this was glorious news. You mentioned that you want to allow schools or empower schools, encourage schools to understand the founding values of America. And you mentioned that one of your first tasks as superintendent was to implement merit pay and tutoring. And I want to know, how were you able to implement merit pay for teachers when you have a teachers union that would likely fight you tooth and nail?
Oh, and they did. They did fight us tooth and nail, and they threatened walkouts and boycotts, and they did all the same fear tactics they're doing right now to President Trump of, oh, you know, if you fire these people or do merit pay, we'll all walk out. And guess what? You know, we got it done, and because of it, we've been able to recruit teachers like never before. We have reversed our teacher shortage trends. We've brought more teachers to the state than we have in over a decade. And again, guess what? Your great teachers go, hey, this is fantastic. And again, it works. And so we just forced it, onto the schools and said, guys, look, we think it's ridiculous the best teachers don't make more money. What are we doing here? You know, do we want to get great people to be teachers and stay teachers, or do we not? And again, the unions have now a record low membership in the state of Oklahoma because people are rejecting their policies. But you have to take the fight to them. You've got to engage parents, get the teachers unions out of the schools, get the parents in charge. And guess what? The parents love it too. They're like, hey, yeah, of course we want to keep great teachers. Of course we want to recruit the best and brightest. So look, it's a common sense measure, but you got to fight through all the fear tactics and the animosity from the unions in order to get good people into the profession.
Yeah, listen, I agree with you, and I'm so glad that that's the response. And anybody who's listening, I really hope they're paying attention. And I hope you track down Ryan Walters if you're an educator, and take him to lunch, buy him a coffee, and get on the horn with him, because this is the type of approach that we need in order to serve children. You really can't serve children if you're not doing these things by bucking the system and flipping the bird to the teachers union, which in way too many states and in way too many situations has way too much political power. Now, Ryan Walters, I want to continue with this quest that you have for something crazy, for people to actually understand the founding principles of our nation and the values that went with it. Talk to us.
Look, we're very, one of the things I heard time and time again on the campaign trail in my state were parents and grandparents said, why is it our kids don't understand American greatness? Why don't they understand the founding generation? And one of the things they kept bringing up is, why is it our kids don't understand the role that Judeo-Christian values played in American history? Well, I get elected, and I start digging into it. We've had teachers sued over having a Bible in the classroom, over having a Bible verse in their curriculum. And I'm going, okay, how in the world do you teach American history and don't mention the Bible? It's the number one most read book in American history. The founders cite it. Every president cited it. Incredible leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., the Pilgrims, all these folks cite it. Well, of course you've got to cite it historically. So we're proud to be the first state to put the Bible back in the classroom. We're going to teach it from its historical context. So guess what? When Abraham Lincoln mentions a Bible verse, we're going to talk about it. When people throughout American history said it influenced our society, we're going to talk about it because, frankly, it is indoctrinating kids into atheism to tell them that there was no role that Judeo-Christian values played in American history. Look, the left can be offended by it and not like it, but they can't change our history. That's part of our history, and our kids need to know the influences that our founders' faith had in the role that they played in American history.
Outstanding. Bring the Bible back. How crazy is that? It's almost as crazy as when the president said that people should buy Bibles. Unbelievable, the times that we live in. I love it. Now, Ryan Walters, what do you suspect will be, I guess, the next shoe to fall. And by that, I mean the left. I know they already got their attack machine getting its gears ready for tomorrow to say kids are starving. They're not going to get school lunch. Kids are losing books. We're firing teachers and aides left and right. There's huge class sizes. What do you think is going to be the rhetoric of tomorrow?
That's exactly right. So what they're going to go to is they're going to go to, the Chicken Little, the sky is falling, schools are going to fall apart. Don't forget, the Federal Department of Education didn't hire a single teacher. They hired bureaucrats. That's what they did. And so what you continue to see is we have got to continue to push back on this eliminates bureaucracy. It gets DC out of the way. And I'm going to tell you the truth, Rich, red states have to step up. We have got to see our red states go and lead on this and say, thank you, President Trump. Here's what we're going to do now that we have been unleashed, that we have been given our power back. We're ready to go here in Oklahoma. We're excited about it. We're ready to take the lead on this. But you got to see this across the country is we have got to see Republicans step up into the fight. President Trump has taken all the bullets, taken all the heat. It's time for us to implement these policies to show how beneficial this is for our kids and our families.
Outstanding. Ryan Walters, let everybody know how they can keep up to speed with you and follow you.
Yes, sir. RyanWaltersForOklahoma.com is our website. Sign up. We'll give you updates. We are leading on education reform. We are following President Trump's America First agenda in education to a T. And we're very active on Twitter, Ryan Walters on Twitter as well. So really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for being the conservative voice and championing President Trump's agenda. Appreciate you very much, Rich.
Same here, brother. Right back at you. Godspeed to you. Keep doing what you're doing. It's a courageous thing, and we need more like you, 1,000 more like you. Folks, make sure you give Ryan Walters a follow. He's on X at Ryan Walters, S-U-P-T, Superintendent Ryan Walters, Souped, and check out his website as well. Ryan Walters, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Godspeed, sir.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
You too. And amigos, your thoughts, calls, and reactions coming up right now. Keep it locked right here.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
After the guest leaves every night and we're doing open phones, kind of at the heartbeat of America. You sit there in this radio studio and suddenly you hear voices. Mobile, Dallas, New York, Miami. And there's kind of a conglomeration of America all in one room.
Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Today is a historic day. Here at Port Everglades, over 22.5 tons or 45,000 pounds of cocaine and 50 pounds of marijuana are valued at over $500 million are going to be offloaded and taken out of circulation. This is an unprecedented seizure of illicit drugs that is the result of 14 different interdictions of drug smuggling vessels off the coasts of Mexico, Central and South America by the crews of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Stone and Coast Guard cutter Mohawk.
That is Secretary Kristi Noem, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, announcing this big drug bust. Did you hear that? It was 45,000 pounds of cocaine. 45,000 pounds. Unbelievable. Anyway, let's hit the phones on that one. Paul, Boise, Idaho, KBOI. Go for it.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I wonder what Hunter's going to do with the rest of his week now that they grabbed his stash.
As far as I know, Paul, I think Hunter's clean now. At least I want to believe that. And he's also not protected. From what I understand, he no longer has Secret Service protection, and he's on this big fancy vacation. So I wish him the best. That's a funny joke, though. Paul in Boise, Idaho. Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure. Let us continue. Where are we going? We're going to Akron, Ohio, WNIR. Check in with Geiger. Go right ahead.
Hey, man. How you doing, Rich?
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Right on. Hey, I just, South Korea did the martial law thing, and I've been hearing a lot of the wackos talk about martial law in the United States, and I think that anybody that ignorant to call for that need pay attention to South Korea, what they did to the guy that declared martial law for essentially nothing, and they deposed him. He's done.
Yeah,
and I'd hate to see that happen. I'd hate to see that happen to Trump, man.
I don't think anything's going to happen to Trump. How are they going to get Trump? He hasn't done anything.
Well, exactly. But I hear a lot of the local weirdos talking about martial law, and I think that it could be his undoing in the House and the Senate. And
how so?
Vance,
help me understand. You're getting ahead of yourself. Forget about Vance. Let's stick with Trump. Trump hasn't declared martial law, so I don't understand where this comes from.
I hear the local weirdo nutcase talk show.
Well, I'm saying I hear all sorts of people saying crazy things just because they're calling for it. I mean, the entirety of the left says Trump is doing this, Trump is doing that, Trump is doing whatever. But until Trump does it, it's really right. We're kind of at a loss there. There's nothing going on. In the event that Trump were to declare, first of all, like President Lincoln declared martial law, and it was not a national martial law. It was not every county all across the entire nation. It was multiple counties in certain areas that they declared martial law, and the streets were closed, and they did what they did. We were at war. So I don't foresee that happening at all, if honestly, or ever. I think President Trump is a very, very bright guy. And again, it happens if it needs to happen, right? But I don't see it happening. And if it didn't happen when a literal election was, in my opinion, stolen from we the people, I don't see it happening anytime in the future. So you let the local crazies and whomever and whatnot say whatever they want. That's what free speech is all about, Geiger. Still there? Hello? All right. We continue.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Thanks,
Go ahead.
man.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate it. And let's see, where else do we go? We go to Saratoga, New York, WGDJ. We check in with Mel. Mel, go right ahead.
Good evening, Rich. Talking a little bit about the happy demise of the Department of Education and hopefully getting rid of the teachers' unions. How does education and politics coincide with each other? Also, with the demise no, they don't. With the demise of the Department of Education, that hopefully we could bring back in the PTA, the Parent Teachers Association, something that my parents are very big into as parents with my education. Way back when I graduated in '77, but I had dyslexia, diagnosed in the mid '60s. They had no idea what dyslexia was, but they were able to get some special education into the school system, not only for me but for others that also have that type of situation in being able to read and comprehend. Also, one other thing too about the salaries in both, not only in education, also in human services, they're very, very low. You get into those two type of career fields because of the love of the career field, not to make a lot of money. I was a counselor, drug and alcohol counselor for 14 years in the system, worked 80 hours a week in order to make $900 take home. I since got out of that system. I make $1,500, $1,600 now driving a tractor trailer. So, it's kind of looking what you need and not what you want. If you want to make money in those two particular career fields, good luck. You get into it because you love it, not because you're going to get rich in it.
That's a really good point that you made, and one that I didn't account for. And it's probably the most important thing, right? Like the old saying, do work that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But, Mel, very, very good point. Number one, and I'm glad you brought up special ed, because there's talk about how the most vulnerable students are going to now lose because there won't be federal dollars. No part of what I've seen is cutting federal dollars yet. right? There may be a reduction in federal dollars because that's what DOGE is there to do. But it's not necessarily to have a punitive effect, right? And the onus has to be on the local school district. You cannot turn around and say, oh, you know, well, we can't with the tax dollars that we take from people. We're not able to do it. We need the feds to do X, Y, and Z. I get how the budgeting works, but this is, I believe, in part designed to do what you just said, right? You're going to have to see alliances built between parents and teachers, cutting out the middleman. And in the same way, we got to cut out the middleman bureaucratically. You know, there's a lot of money that goes to things that don't need to go where it doesn't need to go to. So before you tell any parent or me or anybody else that, oh, we're not going to have enough money for special ed in a given district, then maybe you don't need 75 superintendent assistants, right? Maybe everybody needs to take a trim on this or on that and run this place like a business. Maybe you need to request Elon Musk and his team to come to your school district to help you out, because ultimately you have to make do with what you've got, and we can totally do it. And so the best point Trump made, and maybe I haven't played that audio, but if you haven't seen that video of him signing the order, or the first part of it, he basically says, we're getting rid of this thing because it didn't work. In the last 40 years, we've progressively gotten worse in our rankings with education. Why? Because our federal Department of Education isn't making an impact. So why have one? And I think that's the most brilliant point he's made. Mel, thank you so much for your call. I appreciate it. Shout out to WGDJ and Paul Vandenberg and company. Folks, we're coming right back. The rest of your calls and more in the speed round. Keep it locked right here.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, here we go. Speed round. Let's go to Laura, Watertown, South Dakota, KWAC. Go for it quickly.
Thank you, Rich. Pleasure to be on with you. I really thoroughly enjoyed Brigitte Gabriel's assessment on what's being termed as radical Islam in America. However, I would like to point out, based on their Quran, that is not radical. That is their doctrine, whether it be Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah, Houthis, Boko Haram, they all follow the Quran.
Yeah, the caveat that I'll add to that is, and I think you're right with saying that those groups are similar. They're all very radical terrorist groups. I think the difference here being that while maybe everybody of the Muslim faith wants to preach their faith to all parts of the world, I think some of them take that mandate to be an actual takeover, right? Those that want to implement Sharia law and actually take over society, culture, et cetera, and eliminate the infidel. I don't know that everyone sees it that way. I know for Christians, for example, many of them want to proselytize their faith and they want people to convert to Christianity. And I'm sure that there's a handful out there, or during the Crusades there may have been, where they were like, Christianity or die types, equally as radical. But I don't know that that's all Muslims, because I've spoken with so many that don't have that opinion. But very, very good point that you make, that these groups are very radical nonetheless. Thank you, Laura, in Watertown, South Dakota, KWAC in the building. Thank you for that. And Frank in Evergreen, Tony in Montreal, Robert in Melbourne. The music means they're kicking me out, but I appreciate you guys. And hopefully you'll join me again tomorrow. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night. God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.